I can ask you to sit down if you can, please. I'm only here to do the health and safety stuff, then we'll start the formal proceedings. We are not expecting... It is on. Can you hear that better? Right, thank you. Health and safety, we're not expecting the fire alarm to go off tonight. So if it does go off, could you make an orderly exit, please? There are the doors either side behind you, and there are two doors on each side, one over there and one over there, that exit to the roads. So hopefully none of that's going to happen, but just to let you know. I'm going to pass over to Victor Seidman, who is one of our members who very kindly set this evening up, and he is going to do the initial introduction to Nick Kocher. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Can we all hear okay at the back?
Yes.
Nick, I'm delighted to introduce Marina's interlocutor, Russia expert and financial journalist, Nick Kocher. Nick attends Palmer's Green and Southgate Shore United Synagogue, for the record. He is the son of Professor Lionel Kocher, whose work on modern Jewish history helped establish it as an academic discipline, and author and historian Miriam Kocher. Over the years, Nick has brought a great number of money laundering schemes to light, showing how many of these schemes have been used to finance corruption. His exposés have been published in all the quality dailies and Sunday papers, as well as The Economist, and he has featured on Radio 4 with a series of programmes. Nick is married to artist and portraitist Laura Lehman Kocher, and they have two children at university. Welcome to Hampstead Shore, Nick Kocher.
Victor, thank you very much for those kind words. And I might just interject that actually my dad started his career as a Russian historian and wrote books on the making of modern Russia and Russia and revolution. And were he alive today, I could imagine he'd be quaking in his shoes over what's going on in Russia. And also I could imagine him being quoted and interviewed on television and elsewhere, but alas, not to be. We are very, very grateful and, may I say, honoured to have with us today a lady who knows Russia, knows the machinations of Vladimir Putin, knows the inside of the security machine that is now in Russia's grip, and is an expert in her own right on so much of what we see today. And of course, it is an expertise that has been acquired through her own personal tragedy and deep sadness, and it is all the stronger and the better informed for that. As everyone I'm sure will have seen in the media, Marina is an extraordinary person and has got an enormous presence and interest to all of us, and we are hugely grateful for her to come today. I am going to be asking some rather general and open questions for, I suppose, about half an hour or 40 minutes, depending on how long my questions go on and how long Marina has to answer. And then we will open the floor to any and all questions.
First of all, very good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk in front of you and definitely very open for any questions what will we have after this discussion. And thank you very much, Nick, for this presentation. And we decided to do this as a dialogue, not making just a statement and me be like academical. No, we decided just to talk, even pretend we just hardly knew each other. Yes, and I'm very happy to start this conversation with Nick.
Thank you, Marina. Marina, I thought I would just ask you, talk a little bit about your own background in the Soviet Union, your own experience in the early days of life, and you know, how you came, and then we'll come on to Sasha, of course, but then maybe just to put our audience in the picture of the lady that you were, the girl that you were back in those days.
Okay. I was born in Moscow in a time when it was a certain communism period. In Brezhnev, being General Secretary of Communist Party, we've been all educated in a way we live in the best country in the world, and we need to be very happy to be born in Soviet Union. We had a very promising future. In what way? If you like, you might get to university, or if not so lucky, you will work. You might have health care for free. Your children might go to school for free. Everything was okay. But what was not okay, it was some limit. You can't be better. You just need to be like everybody. You can't buy what you want. You just can't buy what you can find in a shop. You can't read what you'd like to read, because it was all limited. And of course, some people became rebels or dissident, but not most of them. Mostly people in Soviet Union were quiet and lived their life. I think I survived only. I was a very keen dancer. And when I was 15, I was introduced to ballroom dancing, what was existed in Soviet Union. I think it was some very bad things for when Soviet Union collapsed, because this was exactly a very Western culture style. Can you go loud? Okay, I tried. No, it should be okay?
Yeah.
Just let me know, exactly. And ballroom dancing, it was my passion. I did everything. I tried to go to school and receive better mark. My mom would be allowed me to go to dance school. And after I finished high school, and I was, what I wanted to do, just dancing, because it was very competitive. I could travel to another towns in Soviet Union. But my mom said, oh, you're going to university or no dance anymore. And I started to share this two passion, and dancing and my university. I was qualified as engineer of oil and gas industry. Maybe if I continue this, I would be a very rich person, who knows? But when I complete my study, I just knew I'm going dancing. And this was all about as internal immigration from all of this Soviet-style life. Now when I analyze this, why I've been surviving from this Soviet propaganda, from this Soviet pressure, because of that. We did something what was supposed to not exist in a Soviet time. And when Soviet Union collapsed, it was something like fresh air immediately come to all of us. It was not easy, because some people were very much disappointed, because they believed everything would be just as planned. One day they will go for pension, they will have all what is promising, but life changed. And what I said, it was not the easiest time for all of us. And it was not easy just to survive economically, it was extreme criminal. Change from state-controlled country for private business, it's raised a lot of problem. It was people who tried to take money from starting business, just developing, and police never controlling this because they've been almost the same level. It was a period of time, 90s, beginning of 90s. Why I mention this? Because it's a time when I met my husband, Alexander.
I think, Marina, I should come in there because you're answering my questions before I ask them.
You know, we were not prepared. It's all explored.
Yes, my question, so we've now got to the very early 90s. We've got a Soviet Union that's collapsed. We've got a new Russia. And despite the best hopes of the world, the hopes of many people in Russia, we have really Wild West capitalism. We have oligarchs scrabbling around like cats in a bag, in a sack. And then we have the end of the KGB, the Secret Service, and we start of a new security service. And this, I think, is where Sasha came in and how you met him. If you'd like to take on the story, Marina.
Yes, 1993, it was quite tough period for all Russia. After Soviet Union collapsed and except, how to say, it was not just the one country, it was a 15 independent country after one day. And everything started to be changed, and system change, and security service change. There was a lot of problem. And this was a year, 1993, when there was a huge conflict between Yeltsin, who was the first president of independent Russia, and the parliament. This was a discussion for how much right a president of Russia might have. If you remember, or maybe not, but this was a real military exercise in Moscow, and we all could see how a parliament was just bombed because people just stuck in this building and make this all disagreement with Yeltsin. And everybody believed this was the first crisis of new Russian democracy, when everything became as not supposed to be. After 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed, and what Nick just said, it was from one side it was freedom, but from one side it was a lot of criminality. But this was the first crisis. And it's exactly when I met my husband, Alexander Litvinenko. He was working for a very special unit to fight organized crime. Even more, he was working in a very special line. He called this a Georgian. Georgia was a former Soviet republic. At the same time, in Georgia, it was a civil war. One Georgian fight against another Georgian. There was a lot of criminality. Some rich families left Georgia and came to Moscow to live. And somebody who tried to take advantage of these families, they kidnapped members of family for money. And this was just like a business. And this is exactly what my husband, Sasha, Alexander Litvinenko, did. He helped people to find these members of family and just not to pay $1 million for your son or for daughter. And this was his story when I met him. And of course, I was absolutely just, oh my God, this guy helping families, helping people, he doing right things. I've never ever associated him with KGB. Even somebody said, okay, there's a new security service, is a former KGB. But it's not about my husband. He never been an agent, he never worked as a spy, he never worked against a dissident of people who work for democracy. He fight against crime. And it made me feel very proud of him because I saw real things when I met people who he had helped. It was unbelievable. It was very good. Only things what was not good, he was absolutely in love with his work. Yes. If I could be jealous, it's just about this. It was not a time of mobile phones. If you remember, it was a pagers, just like somebody message received, and I had this pager. And when he could not come from work, because it was not from 9 to 6, and it was not in use, of course I was nervous, and he could say, Marina, if it's not news, it's good, because it's still good. If you start need to be nervous after just 3 days, but before that, you should not be nervous. Okay, it means I should be trained as a wife of person working in this special service.
I was going to ask you, Marina, I mean, well, what kind of person, you've said he was a workaholic and hugely devoted to his job and country. What, is there a little more you can just say about him, his personality or his interests?
Yes, of course. First of all, it was very important a day how we met. It was my birthday. And we always said, you are my present for my birthday. But when I met him, I've never thought he's my future husband. It's true, I've never thought. I saw him as a very nice guy, very shy, much younger of his age, and you never ever think he is a security officer at all, because he was just absolutely different. But in 2 months, it became more serious. And in 3 months, I was just, I would say like, saying, no way, you escaped. Just like this, directly. I'm going to marry you, and you just need to be ready for this. It's all. Yes, it takes just 3 months to decide we're going to be together. But even if Sasha had this very difficult job, and I might be very nervous, but I felt very much safe with him. And this was a very important feeling, what was always between of us. Anything happened, we will talk about what happened to us, why we escaped from Russia. But it was every time feeling I'm safe. Even I had to do some very risky stuff.
Marina, you quite quickly afterwards, I think Sasha started to discover that everything around him in Russia, in the Secret Service, was not as he had hoped, and things started to get quite rocky. Would you like to explain how that happened, and to what extent you were aware of it, and to what extent did he try and protect you from worry that you've talked about?
I'm again, maybe I jumped a little bit forward, but maybe somebody watched a new play, The Patriots, in the West End, and a name of Boris Berezovsky. It's quite familiar for you. And this was exactly when Sasha's time understanding more insight over new power in Kremlin, it started as well. Sasha met Berezovsky in 1994, when it was an attempt to kill Berezovsky by blow up his car. His driver was killed, his bodyguard was injured, and Boris has some trauma as well. And Sasha was in a group of investigators to find who was behind of this crime. And for Boris Berezovsky, Sasha was as example of new officers of security service, not like old-fashioned or old-style. And they begin quite interesting relationship, because Sasha didn't work for Berezovsky, he worked for security service, but Berezovsky was always happy to invite him, to join him, to go to Kremlin, to meet people who've been close to Yeltsin as his head of his service and as a security service. And for Sasha started to just a good picture of what is happening. But after 1996 particularly, he realized security service started to be a service for somebody, not for state. Corruption started to be huge. And even you start to investigate any case, you can't complete because you always be stopped because something's going up. And for him, it was just a huge disappointment. And he started to change one place to another one. But before 1996, this was another event in Russia. It was a Chechen War. It was the first Chechen War. It started in 1994, and first Chechen War finished in 1996, exactly. Sasha never been in the front line, but as a security service officer, he knew exactly what happened with this war. And for him, it was again like an open eyes. Something is wrong when your own country use bombs in your own territory, when your citizens are dying, when children lost parents, and he started to realize more and more it's all unfair and why we need to support it. And this was all like a developing his understanding Russia doesn't become a democratic country at all. In 1997, it was like completed. And a new unit he started to work was specifically created for special operation. But this special operation was against individual who might be as a businessman, even there might be Chechen nationality, or it might be just rich people. You might need to kidnap these people, just pretend you are criminal. You know, just doing something what really illegal. And Sasha raised always this question, why we have to do this? And last moment, what happened to him, it was a question, would you be able to kill Boris Berezovsky at the end? This was the first question to my husband, Alexander, when he just realized no more. Boris Berezovsky at this time was a statesman. He was a head of some security, some office. And if you received order like this, or just even question, would you be happy to kill Boris Berezovsky, you need to make some statement about this. And of course Sasha did, and all this investigation started. And at the end, not people who asked for this crime, but officers been blamed, maybe, for doing this. And this was all conflict, Sasha and FSB. And a birth, I would say, of this conflict was a press conference in 1998 on a TV channel. Sasha openly said about criminality, about corruption in FSB. Even more, it was the first time when he said, if you not stop this, it will be a lot of problem. Because FSB became a criminal organization. We need to protect people from this.
And if I'm not wrong, Marina, it was at that. So Sasha went on the public stage. He with some colleagues, and he went to the media, and he said, "This is what we've been told to do. That this group of special operations in the FSB has been created, and we, as officers who were there, we are, as it were, refuseniks. We are refusing to play along with this sort of order." And if I'm, again, not wrong, this is what drew Sasha to the attention of the president, but not yet, of course, Putin, who was already starting to be mentioned in terms of a rising star. He'd formerly been the mayor of St. Petersburg.
It's not exactly the same, because Putin was already in a period of time when he was not a vice-mayor of St. Petersburg, because he lost election in 1996, and he moved to Moscow to the administration of president, and only in 1998, because of this conflict, what Sasha and his colleagues started to raise these questions, why we have to do this all criminality, Putin became a head of security office. He became director of FSB. Like from nobody, it was his first position. He became known as a statesman.
understood. And I believe Sasha went to Putin, and he drew attention to his questions, his doubts, his complaint about the behavior of these orders, or rather the group of officers that were giving these orders. And I think I'm right in saying Putin sort of ignored him, basically. He didn't get what he'd hoped would be the buy-in from Putin to say, oh, that's, we can't have that, I'll do something about it. Putin coldly neglected it, and it seems to me that at that point, Putin said to himself, this man is marked, I'm not, he can't be around.
Yes, that's absolutely. After 3 months after this meeting, Sasha was arrested. He spent in prison 9 months for just doing nothing. All his operative work being collected by prosecutor service, and they just try to find what they might use as a mistake or anything against of my husband. He spent almost 7 months in Lefortovo, is a strict prison in Moscow. After first trial, he was called as innocent because, of course, he didn't commit any crime. But they immediately rearrested him in a courtroom and sent him to another prison. It's an old-fashioned, and I thought it was most dangerous, but it was not actually. It was not so dangerous. Prison called Butyrka. And after that, he was released on bail, but it was another case against him. It was definitely shown they will not let him go. They will take another case and another case, and finally they will put him to prison. This was the scenario. And because he didn't want not only to go to prison, he just realized our life, me and our son, he was 6 years old then, in dangers. And this was a plan, not mine, I didn't know about this anything, but for Sasha to get us out from Russia, doesn't matter where, but out from Russia.
Marina, it must have been a hugely worrying time. How much did you know about what was going on out there to Sasha, the threats, the cases, the horrible life of being in prison for obviously things that he didn't commit? Did he take you into his confidence? Did you ever say to him, are you sure you should be doing this? Why don't you do something a bit safer?
Of course. As a typical woman, I could ask him, why I have to do this? Are you sure? I was, as many Russian people believed, we still live in not a democratical country, but something is going to change. It's never going to be worse. It's some mistakes, it's something maybe not right, but it's never going to be as in Soviet Union. We still have democratical media, we have courts. I still believe it's all mistake. My husband would be released and our life going to be as better as it's supposed to be. But Sasha knew is not. It's unbelievable. He knew this so many years ago, like in the end of 90s, and particularly when Putin became president. And now for many people it took 23 years to realize Putin is just a murderer. He's a killer.
Did Sasha talk to you at that time about Putin, what he thought about him?
He didn't take him as serious as maybe everybody, but in what way? He didn't look as a powerful man. He was a criminal, and for what Sasha knew, because he connecting to organized crime in St. Petersburg. He had a lot of communication with the security service, what was corrupted too, and Sasha had this old knowledge. But he didn't look as a person who could take by force whole country. And this was Sasha's view, like a soft, a person who not a very strong, but maybe being supported with another people who might be was stronger and more powerful.
And I think things got so desperate and so dangerous that one day Sasha arranged, or you decided to go and leave the country.
Yes, it was like a spy story because Sasha left Moscow for some reasons to go to south of Russia to meet his grandparents, for what he did say, but it was not true. And I realized it's later. He been in Georgia already, just tried to escape from Georgia to another country, but he didn't tell it to me. He just asked me to buy a new mobile phone and communicate through this new phone. And we discussed what country I could buy tickets or get visa, and this was Spain. And again, I had no idea for what's this reason. It was end of October, and he told me, just go for holiday. I said, what's a holiday? End of October, we already started school, and our son needs to go to school. I start my work. He said, no, please, you have to go for holiday. And when I was in Spain, this was started a very difficult moment, because we discussed about this decision, not go back to Russia. But it was not where to go. It was just one decision, not to return. But we didn't know what would be our place to live.
And I think you tried to dissuade him from leaving Russia. You didn't want to leave Russia, you wanted to return. Your parents were in Russia. For you, you didn't understand what was happening, obviously the backstory, and you then got persuaded by the man you've already mentioned, Boris Berezovsky.
When I talked to Boris Berezovsky staying in Spain, I said, no, I can't. I need to go back to Russia. I have my parents, and I understand my life in Russia. I don't know where I'm going to go anywhere. He said, life is changed, and everything is going to be in Russia just worse. Your husband definitely would be in prison, and nobody would help him, and you even don't know if he would be able to release from prison. And this was my just decision to save family. I've been motivated only to have a father for my son, to have my husband with me, because without my agreement, Sasha never ever decided to escape from Russia. He said, okay, if you want to go back to Russia, I'm going back to Russia too. And this was my decision just then to save family.
And Boris called you up and he said, no, you've got to leave. And you said, okay.
He even didn't push me, but he gave me this kind of support. Because I knew I have nobody, nowhere, but he said, Marina, you should not worry. I'm really, promise, I'll help you.
And of course you had a young son, as you've already mentioned, so life was not easy in this degree of uncertainty.
From one side, when you have a child, it's a lot of responsibility. But for me, he was as a rock. Everything what I knew I have to do because of son. We can change our life, but nobody asked him, would you like you to live in another country? Would you like to move? And this was just understanding. I have to do something good for our son. And this was actually a very, very important.
Okay. And I think your next, so you are now really wandering migrants and, with needing in desperate need of somewhere secure. And of course, you must have been wondering, and Sasha must have been wondering, what the response of Putin and Russia would be to this disappearing, this defection, as they would put it, officer.
Yes, it was a huge story. First of all, officer of security service escaped, and with his family, and was a lot of coverage and publicity. But in some time, it's little bit became quiet, and Sasha worked very hard for application to stay in UK. But again, didn't decide to go to UK. It was not as a first choice. I'll tell you, being honest. This was only way to go to UK without transfer visa. And when we had this decision taking in Istanbul, because we couldn't go not to America without visa, we couldn't go nowhere. And suddenly somebody said, oh, we can go to Moscow via London because you don't need transfer visa. And when we were land in London, you might ask for political asylum. And this actually happened. We've been illegal immigrant.
Oh.
You arrived, so America didn't work out. And you arrived in London, and Sasha, I think, went to the local customs or police or whatever, explained the situation, and what happened then?
We spent almost 8 hours in the airport to be questioned and asking everything. Because being a security officer, it's very suspicious. From one side, you might be an honest person who tried to escape, but from another side, you might be double agent. Again, it was quite difficult. But we had a lawyer who met us in the airport. In this case, we had some kind of easy situation. We were allowed to get out from airport and to live in an accommodation, not in a detention, some property. And after that, Sasha started to work as a lawyer to prove for what he did, what he is planning to do. And for 1 month, I just spending time with Anatoly, walking around London to go to museum, being like a tourist. But in 1 month, I realized, no, I'm not tourist anymore. And we started to more and more understanding it's our new house, it's now a new state. We need to learn language to speak, we need to learn how to live, communicate, and how this our new life in UK just began in 2000.
And Sasha, I think, was writing books about Putin and saying what he knew, what he thought, and inflammatory, critical, highly critical books about what was happening to Russia.
Absolutely. If somebody interested in this modern history of Russia, remember in 1999 it was an apartment bombing in a few cities. It was exactly a period of time when Putin became prime minister from nobody. And when this was 2 buildings collapsed in Moscow and more than 300 people died at the night, it was one building by another one, like 1 week by another week. People have been so scared. I was in Moscow at this time, and Putin was the first time shown as a strong man. And it was like now, and when Sasha published a book, Blowing Up Russia, he proved it was like a special operation of security service to bring Putin to power, to make him from nobody, but as a strong man. It was very difficult to believe to this version, but Sasha have a lot of evidence. He brought them together. And I would say it was like 40-60% who trust to this version and who is not. But after what happened to Russia and what happened to Ukraine, now more people to believe it was a special operation of security service to bring these buildings down, but make Putin as a strong man.
And of course, at this time, Sasha was beginning to, he'd hoped, of course, that Britain would be the bastion of security. He'd come here thinking it was an island state that no one could touch. But at the same time, Britain was also becoming the home of a lot of Russian money, oligarchs, security. Russia started to take more interest in Britain as a home, as a haven, and it sort of put Sasha's position into more vulnerability, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, and of course Sasha's qualification as a work against organized crime became a very important, because Russian money was not just a business money. Sometimes it was money from crime, and it need to be checked, and connection between organized crime and people from Russian government was so obvious. And it need to be proved. And Sasha was a huge specialist. When he was asked, for some reason, became on consulting for security service and here in UK, and then in Spain, because Spain was another place for Russian dirty money, for organized crime, as the best place to be. And this was Sasha's work. He's supposed to start in 2006.
And do we assume that this was the provocation, this was the basis, the catalyst for the decision in the Kremlin that Sasha needed to be removed?
It is the most difficult things to discuss what was the reason to kill my husband, because you always know it was not reason to kill him. But when we were on the public inquiry, and this was just important to discuss what this, or this, or this, or this, it was at least 7 versions. And one of these was because Sasha explored all way how to these state people earn money illegally and connecting to organized crime. Another thing is because he irritated Putin to publish a book or articles on internet or doing something else. Or he works with the Italian security service, with the parliament. There was a lot of work to explore all this criminality, what became not just a problem for Russia, but for whole Europe.
And Marina, can you take us through that horrendous period when, you know, the polonium was administered?
Just in the beginning of 2006 was a huge party celebrating 60 years of Boris Berezovsky. It was just amazing. He invited a lot of people from Russia, and we were sitting in the same table with some Russian-speaking people, and one of them was Andrei Lugovoy, who was a few later accusing of poisoning my husband. They started to talk because Lugovoy used to work for Boris Berezovsky, and not Sasha, not Lugovoy, never been friends, but they had both the same interest, and they discussed what might be working together. And when they had meeting later in October, Lugovoy brought another, his business partner, Dmitry Kovtun. And when Sasha first time mentioned him, he said, I don't like him, he's just something strange about him. But who knew that was already 2 times attempting to poison my husband? Because it happened 3rd time, 1st of November, and dose of polonium was much bigger than they used before. Sasha collapsed in first night, but we have no idea it was some poisoning by something. I thought it would be maybe food poisoning, it might be some seasonal flu, anything what we have as this kind of symptom. And then we called for ambulance 2nd night, and doctors came to us and they checked Sasha and they didn't find anything. They've been a little bit surprised. His body temperature was very low, not high, but all other symptoms, sickness and some pain, it was very similar to seasonal flu. And they just said, oh, you better to keep him home, take him more water, and it's all. But problem developing very fast, and the next day he became much worse. And when he was taken to hospital, people said, we actually don't know, but maybe it is just some E. coli bacteria, what irritated your bowel, makes you feeling sick and all like this. And they just decide to put him under control in hospital. But every time when we tried to talk about poisoning, nobody took it serious.
You tried talking about poisoning.
Yes, Sasha first time immediately mentioned this to me, but I said, no, it's not possible. We live in a country, in control, but who's going to poison you and how? But it takes another almost 2 weeks less than 2 weeks, but 10, 11 days when Sasha started to develop sight of radioactivity without, again, any reasons. But doctors in the Barnet Hospital couldn't find anything.
Did you say Barnet Hospital?
Yes, it was in Barnet Hospital he was taken to. But I don't blame people at all. If you came to hospital and say somebody poisoned by radioactive material, what people will tell you? That this is just a story, a spy story, it's not a real story. And even when Sasha tried to explain, I'm a former officer of security service from Russia, I have a powerful enemy. Do you know what was the reaction? He's just unstable. Yes, it's some psycho, maybe because he has this physical problem and he started to see this as something very unusual. But in 11 days, of course, when it was obvious something wrong, they took a first blood test for poisoning. And this was Italian. And it was first investigation by local police being opened of poisoning. Of course, I was the first suspect immediately. You know, it's like a protocol. I was not arrested, but all mobile telephone was taken from us. Sasha was questioned, but he was immediately transferred to us.
Marina, may I ask, was Sasha still fine mentally? He wasn't.
And this was a big question. When you're talking about poisoning thallium, it's more nervous system being affected. But Sasha was absolutely fine mentally, but physically he just lost more and more, like almost every day. But when you don't know how to prove what is happening to your husband, and particularly when you are in hospital and you believe people know exactly what to do, it was a very difficult situation. But when he was transferred to University College Hospital, all started to just like accelerate and became a speed, and there was more attention. Police been involved, and now not the local police, it was Scotland Yard. But it was only the last 4 days for Sasha. But it was enough 4 days for him to give all evidence to police. And they have all locals, all places he went, who meet, because he knew what to say, what exactly would be important information. Even if Sasha did not survive for 23 days since the moment he was poisoned, polonium would be never discovered, and it would be perfect murder. Sasha died in 2, 3, 4 days, and this death would be unexplained.
So how was it explained, Marina?
Because when it was obvious radioactivity, but not any trace of gamma radiation, because after Chernobyl particularly, all knows what does it mean radioactivity when it's at gamma. But this was one physicist in hospital who just said, okay, if it's not gamma, why are we not checking for alpha radiation? What is completely different, what has not affected you from distance, like in Chernobyl, but affected you if you're taking this inside of your body. Because it's a very short wave, and when you just digest it or inhaled, it destroyed all your cells in your body. And for what happened to Sasha? It means it's a long-term just a damaging and failing of all your organs. But again, if it happened earlier, polonium would be not discovered. And this would be just, you can blame anybody for doing this. But when polonium was discovered, because some samples of Sasha's urine and blood was sent to military laboratory, and the day when he died, it was discovered it was polonium.
And then how did you deal with it? How did you handle it? How was the media? How was your emotions?
First of all, when we came home with Anatoly, because we were in hospital together to receive this news, we didn't know about polonium yet. I received a call at midnight from Scotland Yard, and they said, Marina, we need to see you. I said, now, after what happened to me? At midnight, he said, yes, we have to tell you something what just very important. And when they came to my house and said, Marina, this is radioactive polonium-210, and we really don't know what to do with this. We know it's a highly radioactive, it's a very strong poison, and you need to leave a house. I said, how? As soon as possible. And just one night, I lost my husband, and in 1 hour, I just need to leave a house. And I never came back, because it was taken from us for 2.5 years. It's still like contaminated, and nobody will care about to clean it. And because polonium makes life just shorter every day, all physics knows, and one day it became completely clean. And we were all waiting for 2.5 years when house became completely clean. I was living just in the other area of London, but I could understand how neighbors were paranoid. When you live just close to the ghost, and nobody could explain, is it dangerous and how is it dangerous? And this was all story what happened after.
And then, Marina, you were determined to find out and expose what happened, and you inaugurated an inquiry.
This was, it's good to say in 2 words, but it took 10 years. After all of
Because
this...
nobody wanted to know, right? I mean,
what happened in 2007 when all investigation was completed and Lugavoi was named as the first suspect and asked to be extradited from Russia, but Putin himself said, no, we not extradite Russian citizens. And David Miliband, who was foreign minister, and he was a very supportive. I have met him twice, and I would say it was a great support from him. And when he always raised the question to Sergei Lavrov, who's still the foreign minister of Russia till now, and said what we're going to do with Litvinenko case, but they always deny any involvement. And one day Putin said, it's British need to change their brain. It's not us who need to change constitution. This was all like this dialogue. But police investigation was completed. International reaction was just nothing. Some diplomat was expelled. Some security between Russia and United Kingdom was frozen. Communication, it's all. But business as usual. Everybody decide, okay, it was a terrible, it was British citizen who was killed in the British soil, but we will try to keep this relationship to Russia because it's very important. We need a business, we need oil, we need a gas, and it looked like okay. And I was asked not to be in a hurry and ask for inquest. Without any suspect, I was lucky if I have not a trial, but I could call for inquest and to see exactly what happened to my husband and all. But inquest was called just in 2011, in 5 years after my husband died. But in 2011, it was a little bit dilated, but in 2012, it was the first time a coroner, Sir Robert Owen, who took this case, said, I have a materials that prove a Russia state behind of this crime. It became not only just discussion about how my husband died, what was discovered, it was already became more political. And at the same time, British government, what was already mostly conservative party, they make all files behind this proof. It's a Russia state. They made this in secret files. It means we were not allowed to. It means we were not allowed to use this during hearings. We will not be able to prove Russia state behind of this crime. And only way was to go to public inquiry in another jurisdiction. I became professional. I never even can pronounce this word, but now I can say like an inquest for public inquiry. But public inquiry, we've been not granted because they said you are just enough with inquest. And it was exactly Theresa May who made this decision, just in the base of government. And this was a new direction for me, to suing her, like a traditional review, to go to the High Court, to saying, I have my rights for public inquiry. And this was another jurisdiction. And this was very dramatical time, because if I lose this case, I should pay. This was already about money. And this was quite a serious moment. And when my lawyer, incredible lawyer, Ben Emerson, told me, Marina, you did enough. You don't need to go so far, because it's now about your money. You might lost it. It will be just very difficult. I say, okay, do you need to pay immediately if I lost? He said, no, not immediately. Okay, it means I could raise this money, I might find this money. Okay, I would do everything what I would be able to do. And I said, let's go ahead. And we won. Finally, we won, and Theresa May lost, and we had our right for public inquiry. And public inquiry were open in 2015. In 2016, we had this strong verdict against Russia state, and even more. In 2016, Vladimir Putin was named as a person who organized this murder of my husband. It all happened in 2016, and in 2020, the same verdict was supported by European Court of Human Rights, exactly in the same words.
Marina, I'm thinking we should perhaps stop there.
Yes, it
because
was good introduction.
I think and I wonder if there might be a few questions.
Right, happy to take questions. Can we put your hands up, please? Yes, gentlemen there. Could you speak up, please?
Marina, asking this question is, how do you feel about Putin and Russia today after what happened this week? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I know Russia became now as a huge subject, even more than before. And unfortunately, we should talk about Russia not as a beautiful country with a great story, with amazing music and literature. Now we're talking more about Russia as a state, what it became as a huge problem to all of us, people living in Europe, in America, everywhere. Putin was created, and it was helping to create him, not just people inside of Russia, unfortunately, and outside. I do understand, all wanted stability in Russia, and Putin looked like a person who can keep this stability. But this was kind of fake, because this stability was based on crime, not democracy, and not absolute stability for what we see now. And after being a president for 23 years, he didn't make Russia as a great. Always what he said, we need to take Russia from its knees. He said we always have enemies surrounded by us. We always have NATO who try to be close to our border. He always wanted to make Russian people to feel they need to fight, not to live, but to fight and be united. And if you take all period of his presidency and being a prime minister, there was always a war. He started with this blowing up houses or Chechen war in 2000. This was war in 2008. He started war in Ukraine. And this was always a difficult situation when he could tell to Russian people, you need to be strong, because we have a different or very difficult situation. And he built this society I could compare with as Stockholm syndrome. People living as hostages, and they need to survive, and this only way to pretend they believe for what Putin said.
Thank you. Any other questions? Victor.
Going back to that 60th birthday party, could you tell us a little more about what happened to Boris Berezovsky?
Who went to watch this play, The Patriots? I think you enjoy, yes. I suggested you to go to watch this. Not a very good entertainment, but is a really interesting understanding what does it mean to be patriots. When we're talking about what does a patriot mean for Russia, Putin says, I am patriot. And he believes maybe he's a patriot for Russia. And Berezovsky believed he's a patriot. And he did what he did. It was good for Russia. And Sasha was patriot. And he did right things for Russia too. But Berezovsky was extraordinary man, and it was a tragic figure, because he was a mathematician, and he might be a very successful mathematician if would be maybe Soviet Union never collapsed. But when Soviet Union collapsed, people were just thirsty for be successful, to be rich, to be, to live luxury life, everybody. And everybody started to earn money. Somebody very legal, somebody not legal, but all system in Russia was very shaking. And Berezovsky became extremely rich. And it was not only business, he realized he might play with politics also. And this was a dangerous game. And when he brought Putin to the top, not just him, but he was just one of them who brought Putin to the top. And he believed it always would be like this. Putin make politics, I'm doing business and money. But Putin was completely different idea. And immediately when he became president, he started to change all independency of governor, changed the rules. And Berezovsky was very outspoken. He said, oh, if you're going to do this, I would be against of you. But Putin said, who against us? It's enemy of us. And how it was all broken. And Berezovsky was in exile, and he became, as the first, the most outspoken enemy of Putin. He supported First Orange Revolution in Ukraine. He spent a lot of money. He always being missing Russia. He always tried to get back to Russia. He believed to come back to Russia, but he was finally destroyed. Not only financially, his case against Abramovich didn't go well. He was blamed for saying not truth. He was like not a reliable witness. He was absolutely devastated. And after a few months after losing this case, he died, and it's still open inquest. Was inquest and open verdict. It's still not 100%. Is he committed suicide or he was killed? I'm in a position he was killed.
Gentleman over there.
I was just going to ask him, but I'll ask you in fact on what you just said, which is the play left it open. The verdict was open.
Yes.
You knew Berezovsky and you proved that your husband was murdered. What's your view on Berezovsky?
What I say, for me, it's still open verdict. I can't believe he committed suicide. I'm maybe not strong psychologist to understand what does it mean clinical depression. We never know what might happen to people during this process, and maybe they might make something extraordinary. But I still think Berezovsky was a strong man, and he could just survive from what happened to him. But if you take a history of KGB, and if they have an order to kill somebody, it's not a timing. And when it was decision to kill Berezovsky in 90s, it doesn't mean they give up in 1000. And I think it might be killing for me.
Bruce over there, and then Henry.
Can I ask you, please, Marina, about Mr. Navalny? I have enormous admiration for you, and certainly, do you think he was wise to return to Russia when he was, I think, last in Western Germany? Would he be not more effective had he come to the West and spoken against Putin and his friends, rather than where he is now, because it seems that he's gradually being crushed in various prisons and is unable, therefore, to make any contribution towards the argument against Putin?
Alexei Navalny is extraordinary oppositioner, And I would say number one, he was really effective, he was brave, and he was very creative, and he had a lot of young people all around Russia, not just in Moscow or other big cities, everywhere who supported him. But it was so difficult to believe how Russia would be quickly changed, and just being oppositional, you became a criminal. And what happened to Alexei Navalny when he was attempted to poison in 2020, and it was just luck, he was taken to hospital in Berlin, to Charité, when it was proved he was poisoned. But he always believed he's a Russian politician, and he couldn't think he would stay outside of Russia and doing something when his own people who supported him still live in Russia. But what I said, situation changed so quickly. He's very wise, but maybe he was too brave. Even he expected he would be arrested, but he didn't expect it he would be taken for so long time to prison, and he would be just crushed. And everything what you can't call a justice system is not at all. You have no any justice system in Russia after that. But after Navalny, we have more people who now we can call political prisoners. For example, Vladimir Karamurza. He is a British citizen. He's a half British, half Russian. And he was a very strong person who created Magnitsky Law. If you're familiar with this, Magnitsky Law, it's against corruption, and it's now not extended to Russia. You can take this against people who involved in any corruption case. And Vladimir Karamurza, now in prison too, he was attempted to poison twice also, but he decided to go to Russia last year. He was just accused of doing something wrong. After that, he was put to prison, and now he has 25 years. It's a sentence. This is the best Russian people who might be president or government of future Russia, and we could have a better Russia. But unfortunately, until Putin in the power, and they try to seize this control of this country and control of everything, because it's mostly about money, but not about state, not about people.
Marina, thank you for sharing your story with us tonight. You've shown us how brave and strong you are. Do you fear for your own life?
First of all, when I decided to do, even I didn't know what I'm going to do, really, I was just asked, would you like to know who killed your husband? And I said, yes. After I said this, I couldn't stop, because it was every time like you open door and you think it's your last room, but you have to go to another door and to another one. And just you realize in one moment, if you will stop now, you never forgive yourself for not exhausted everything what you'll be able to do. And because I believe I do right things, I've never felt I need to be frightening. I'm not a politician. I'm not doing something of a financial case. I think I do just the right things. It was my husband, it was the father of my son. And all this, Anatoly was 12 years old when his father was killed. It's a difficult age for boy anyway, but particularly for Anatoly, it was very difficult to grow up and to know your father is a legend, almost like a science. And it's a difficult, and brings this case to public eye as a public inquiry. And Anatoly, our son, agreed to be there. Even more, he gave a statement. I just realized it was even just special to do for him. Just to rise with his father, to understand about his father more, not just from my words, not just the good things, because it was everything saying about Sasha. And it makes me feel strong for doing something normal and not afraid for what I'm doing.
I wanted to ask you this: did the what impact the poisoning of the Skripals had on you? How did you feel about that? And did it shed any light on any of the prior events?
It's a very interesting things happened when Skripal was poisoned. In 2006 was already public inquiry verdict. It was obvious known as the Russian state behind all this, as a Russian agent. It was a highly likely operation of Russian security service. And after that, 2018, they have a similar case. How is it possible? Does it mean British security service didn't pay enough attention? Or they just decided, okay, we just make this case, but we might relax after this. I've been questioned, what do you feel after that? I said, I'm really shocked. We have a similar case just in 2 years after public inquiry. But Skripal was a little, not a little bit, completely different story. Skripal was a double agent, it's for sure. He was exchanged in 2010 when a big group of Russian agents was arrested in America, and this was exchanged of Skripal and 2 more people from Russia and 10 people Russian from America. And he lived his life in Salisbury just very quiet. He wasn't outspoken as my husband. He never published critical book against Putin or anything. But he was enemy. And when Putin was asked, like in a year when this was exchanged and Skripal was sent out from Russia, what Putin as prime minister thinks about this, he said he's a traitor and only punishment for betrayal is death. And it's obvious, just like an order. But again, you never know what's the timing. It was some investigation, but it's not a family here and it's a highly secure, and we don't know nothing about this case, unfortunately. And we don't know many cases, unexplained deaths, what happened Russian citizens here in British soil or British citizen, again, connecting to Russian business. It's still a lot of cases. And I understand it's just a wish of family or relatives to make this case be open. But not everybody wants this.
Yes, lady here and then behind.
First of all, your English is impeccable. I mean, I can imagine you learned all the legal language and everything. It's really, I think it's wonderful. I have 2 questions. One of them, can you tell us a bit about your husband as a child and how he got into the Secret Service at all? Because he must have been a patriot, they chose him and all that. The second question is, yesterday, or the news and everything, I think it's a honey trap. I think it's, I don't know what's happening, nobody knows, but it could be that they've moved the army to come back in a different way, and I'm a bit worried. Do you agree with me, or possibility?
Okay, may I start with second question, because it's now just a lot of attractive. Day before, it was like a different life. Everybody been so excited. When I talked to a friend of mine, when I was reading Russian websites, everybody were shocked from one side, but so much excited because all we're waiting for something that need to be changed in Russia. Because people knew war is just wrong, but they don't do anything. They send children to war to die. They send fathers, brothers, everybody to die for nothing, and nobody been against of this. And suddenly, Prigozhin, who is a person you just can't trust at all, became a rebel. Even more, just started his march, he said, to Moscow. But again, Prigozhin himself is a very complicated person. For everything that he did for last years, it was just wrong. He has his private army, and he had a huge business in Africa. And during this business, some independent journalist who tried to investigate this business was killed. And it still don't know who killed them. But all remember it was Prigozhin who didn't like to be investigated. He frightened people from Navalny group who tried to investigate him. He tried to take to the court many people from media, and he always being just in a pause. He's very close to Putin. And everything what he did, it was just very strange. He might criticize a military office. He could criticize Minister of Defense. If somebody else might say this, he would be immediately received 7 years sentence in prison, but not Prigozhin. And when he started this march yesterday, I said it was a so strange feeling. From one side, it's great, but from another side, you can't trust him. And it's all finished at the end. Yes, and everybody been so like, what it was, why? He just been so close to Moscow, and suddenly he decided, no, I don't want to kill Russian, I don't want Russian blood, would be just waste. And he just decided to go back, and now he's in Belarus.
If.
Yes, if. And this is a strange story, but what only things I believe, it doesn't help to image of Putin. He doesn't show as a strong person. He doesn't show as a person who has a monopoly over power. But it was always just saying, no, Putin's so strong, he controlling everything. He doesn't. Because he can't...
Unless he uses it as a decoy, and then it's clever.
And I think it's not end of this show yet. We need to wait for what would be next. And being today morning on BBC show, it was a very good comment of Steven Rosenberg from Moscow, who is an amazing journalist based in Moscow. Even him, being in Moscow, he said, we have to wait. What is next? It's so difficult to make any analyzing for what might be happened. It always will be wrong. Because Russia saw. And you asked about my childhood or my son?
Your husband.
Oh, my husband? Oh, okay, it's good. Sasha was born in a family of history, like a serving for country. He was like educated as a man to serve to his country for good things. Just his grandfather was a military pilot, and he fought during the Second World War. And Sasha was rising up as in these stories, like to fight for the peace. His father was a military doctor. His uncle was a pilot as well. I don't know he has just this meaning, he's going to be as a military officer, but he was an extraordinary sportsman, really. He was modern pentathlon in a very high level. He was running, fencing, horse riding, shooting, and swimming. And he did it all so well, and it was amazing, yes, seeing him in a horse, because he could just ride any horse and make a good communication and everything. But he joined army when he was 17. And this was just like the start of his career. And when he was 18, he joined military college. After 5 years to be in a military college, he went as a commanders of in some division in army. But then he started to educate it in a different level, and it was just rising from a very low level. But he was a real patriot. Yes, he believes he might save people, he might save soldiers when he was in army. He will save us. It was his duty.
Thank you.
The lady there, and then this lady.
Marina, I find it really interesting. Obviously, you've had a front row seat in this collapse of the Soviet Union and the reconstruction of what is essentially sounds like a cartel of a state, cartel fighting. But I found it really compelling when you said that obviously Putin had come about in the 90s and he sold himself as this, secure, paternal father figure who is going to bring security back. And it reminds me, I don't think he was the only person, because in Israel we also have Bibi Netanyahu is also cultivating his electorate and coming up in a very similar way. And today, I mean, both presidents both leaders have found themselves in power for almost decades, and they both are in a political crisis. But my question, I wonder, is it, when it comes to reform, because people can say, well, they're all heading the same way, they're going to be toppled or something can happen, but do you see the problem as being these particular personalities, or is there a problem with the nature of the infrastructure, and how are they able to exploit that?
You're absolutely right. Russia is not the easiest country to manage. When we're talking about other countries, it's every time much smaller, and it's much easier to make these all reconstructions or everything. For Russia, it's every time problem how big this country. It's even, I think it's amazing joke when a government in Moscow just wake up, other part of country going to sleep. You know how to work in this country. It's every time. But going back to Putin, he's a creator of KGB. And he's even double one as his personality. He was always as a person nobody to trust. He never believed to the West. He never believed to West economy. And this is his personal problem. But make Putin as a president, it was a revenge of KGB. In 1991, KGB was humiliated. It was the strongest organization in Soviet Union. It was a two-part, Communist Party and KGB, and they worked together. In 1991, Soviet Union collapsed, party lost power, KGB was destroyed, monument of Dzerzhinsky in Dzerzhinsky Square was just taken out. It's all. But it doesn't mean people just disappear, and they wanted to take it all back. And when Putin became president, it doesn't mean just that Putin came to the power. This is all KGB came back to the power, and all position controlling oil, gas, and all resources, financial, it was a former KGB people. And not even close to Putin, but much stronger and even higher rank. And this is all story of Russia. But another big problem, this is all people were already corrupted and linked to organized crime. And we had finally, not a mafia state, because when you have a mafia in a state, you have a state to fight against mafia. When we talked about mafia, we always can say, in Italy mafia, in America mafia, but we have state who fight against. But in Russia, it's a mafia, it's state. And this is what's the problem. And why I every time a little bit disagree with saying, okay, Russia it's like the same like this, or it's the same happened in Germany, or maybe the same. It's not the same. It's a similar problem, but it's not the same.
Could we keep questions brief, please? This lady here and then the lady over there.
It's very interesting to hear what you have to say, because I'm sure everybody in this room believes it implicitly. But one of the problems we have in the West is it's very difficult to know where the news is coming from and how we can believe it. And you mentioned Steve Rosenberg, and every night he's on television, I wonder how on earth he gets away with criticism. How does he do it? And yet it seems to be straight down the middle. He seems to say what is actually happening. People have different views about the BBC, but in the main, he alone seems to stand there. How does he do it?
You mean Steve? No, first of all, we need to have our eyes everywhere, and I think it's just your choice, what you selected and what journalist or what media you might think make a more close to the reality. But for Steve Rosenberg, I don't know, he's just serving for so long time, and he knows some details, and he tried to move between, particularly now, it's a very difficult situation, because we know what happened to this American journalist, this Wall Street Journal. He's now in prison, and we're just all waiting how he would be released. And now all foreign journalists in a very difficult situation. And but from another side, we have to have somebody inside to show a picture or to say something or be at least a little bit insider.
Lady here.
Just a personal question, Marina. Have you managed to keep in touch with your family in Moscow, your parents or Sasha's parents?
It's not easy story because my parents have died. My mother died 5 years ago, just before COVID, and my father died 7 years ago. Sasha's parents been divorced since he was born, and this was like different families. And I lost any communication with his father straight after he blamed. He was not poisoned by Russia state. He changed his statement completely and took position what is Russia state believed. It's like MI6, it's the CIA, is Berezovsky who killed my husband. Of course, it's completely different of what was this provided by investigation. But people in Russia now a little bit frightening to communicate. And even if I have some conversation with close friend of mine who are very educated and very nice people, but we don't talk about Ukraine, we don't talk about politics. It's so difficult. And difficult for me, how they don't feel it, your country in a war, and you pretend nothing is happening. But this is only if you want to save just this relationship, just wait. Maybe one day they will be brave enough to talk about this. But for now, it's very sensitive.
One more question from the lady here, and then we are going to stop.
Thank you. It must be very painful for you. I have a million questions, but I want to ask the two of you one question. I remember very well when the KGB came here and accompanied me as I was working, all right? I'm that old. And I also have now contact.
Can you explain, sorry? Sorry.
Well, when in the 70s, we used to have groups of Russian visitors, and the system was that they were not allowed Russian-speaking guides, tour guides. It was ridiculous, yes? But we always had somebody from the KGB with us, because as soon as we were in Parliament and anybody asked a constructive question from the youngsters particularly, this man would jump in front of them and change the subject and we had to go on. So it was totally obvious. But the both of you are so involved with all this, and I recently had contact with some of the Russian community here who are struggling desperately to get the message across to their families in Russia that it is not the way they think it is. Yes? And they were going through hell. And yes, sorry, but the gentleman asked. So my question to you is, mixing with the Russian community here, do you feel they're getting through now?
You will know more than me.
Maybe you need to answer.
I think I know enough of the Russian community.
But you know, a Russian community never been just one.
We know that.
It's so different, and a different reasons, and a different time to come. In my period to come to London, this was some political asylum. It was rich people just to get gold visa and right to live here. It was people for economical reason to receive benefits and stay here for better life. This was all different. And it was particularly people who came not for political reason and not being rich. They're still watching Russian TV, support Putin, and being here and collecting this all social support. And it's, for me, this is very strange, really, how people live here, criticize life here, and supporting Putin, and we still have Russian like this.
Thank you so much, Marina, for coming tonight, for Nick, for bringing Marina and being prepared to ask the questions. Marina, you've been absolutely fascinating. I'm sure the questions have not finished, but we are now going to offer tea and coffee, and cold drinks.
I'm sorry to keep you so long without coffee and tea.
Not at all.
you was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for being with me.
Please stay and ask questions. Nick, this is for you to say thank you for organising it. Please stay, there's tea and coffee and some cake and refreshments, but also we're going to have an evening service downstairs as there's some gentlemen present who need to say Kaddish. So if some of you could go downstairs, please. Do you want to do that straight away? Yes. So